Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and this is Monday, November the 1st, and the defense has taken over now. The prosecution has rested, and defense is now going to do whatever they can to damage the prosecution. That's the way it works. And so what we're going to hear during this week, this is part 10, by the way, of my coverage of this trial, the profiling aspects, not the other stuff. And if you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified of more of these. And also check out my playlist, because I don't just do specific cases. I do many different cases and help people understand criminal profiling and crime scene analysis. All right. So here is what is going to happen now. The defense is going to find the weakest parts of the prosecution, their case, and start attacking it in a variety of ways that will essentially, the concept is, I use the word confuse, but confuse the jury. They've heard this, and now they're going to hear all this. And then they got to figure out who's telling the truth, how significant is what they were told by the prosecution, how significant is it what they're told by the defense. And this gets very complicated when it's not a very clear-cut case. So that's what we have here. One of the main things they're attacking is his mental state. Whether he confessed in spite of his mental state, or that he doesn't have one at all except psychopathy, or did the police and the fact that he was in solitary, as they claim, for so long, did that drive him over the edge? Did he feel like his life was destroyed from the minute the police started glomming onto him, telling everybody he was probably the guy, and then arresting him? I mean, did he just say, screw it all? You're already saying I did it. Fine, I did it, whatever. Did he start having delusions? Was he in a psychotic state? And they're going to push this. Now, one thing I find very interesting is he claims that prior to the day the girls got killed, he was depressive and he was suicidal. Now, first of all, I want to tell you something. Being depressed and suicidal doesn't keep you from being a murderer. But it does get people to think, oh, maybe the guy's just, he's already falling apart. And once the police came after him, he just pushed him off the cliff. It's a reasonable thing to say to get people to feel sorry for you, rather than, nay, I'm perfectly fine and I don't have any issues, but now that you've arrested me, I've lost my mind. So it helps to look weak prior to the police arrest. And he says also that he has an alcoholic, he has sex addiction, and things like that. Sex addiction, which is weird to me that you would want to admit that, because what does that mean? I'm going to say, I haven't heard much about what they found on his computer as far as the websites he wished they wouldn't go to. But I'd like to know, and that has not really been brought out yet. I'll go into the websites he has visited, which I think are very interesting. But as far as what the kind of sex addiction he had, what was it? What kind of addiction? In other words, what was he entranced by? What made him go back over and over and over to something in particular? Because people do have things that fantasies that they want to experience. Maybe the first way they deal with fantasies is to go on to pornographic sites and see things that are similar to things they're interested in. And as time goes on, that usually gets more expanded, shall we say, to, if, for example, if you're interested in sadism, it might start out with some minor sadistic things, but eventually you're on the super sadistic side. If you're into bondage, might start out with a guy just telling a girl to do what he says, and maybe putting a couple of something on her wrist, or some bracelets on her wrist, and some handcuffs, and that's it. But then it goes to, she's tied up to a bed, and then it goes to a ball gag, and then it goes to horrible torture things. So it increases over time if that person is obsessed with that. So what is his supposed addiction to sex? What is he really interested in? I haven't seen the evidence on that yet. So I might as well go and say what he did go visit, which I think is very interesting. And I'll get back to the psychology issues. It says here, the searches are from, okay, wait a minute. Let's see. The searches are from Alan's Gmail account and were done on one of his devices. On October 2nd, 2022, less than 2 weeks before he was initially kidnapped in the case, Alan searched for 65 best kidnapping and hostage movies ever made. Okay. And then another one says there was it also included man held hostage by teen, which kind of is weird. A man being held against his will. So, okay. That's interesting because he's not searching girls being held against their will by a man, but a man held hostage by a teen. That's kind of backwards to what would happen out there in the old woods here. Also, I want to point out, this is from October 2nd, 2022, 2 weeks before he was initially questioned on the case. That's 2022. So we're not talking about right after he went to the... But we aren't talking about before the girls were killed. That's much, much more important because you want to know what led up to the girls being murdered. What fantasy led some guy, bridge guy, what fantasy led bridge guy to want to kidnap these two girls and murder them? So I would like to know what his searches were and what all the porn sites he went to, every kind of movie he watched prior to the murders. I would like to know that because a lot of times people will visit certain sites that they're fantasizing about, that they're interested in experiencing more of before they commit the crime. So let's say a guy is kind of getting interested in, let's say, building a bomb. He's thinking, I wonder what it'd be like to blow something up. So he starts going to these different sites on how to build a bomb. And then he starts looking at famous bombers, the people that have succeeded in blowing up buildings. And he starts fantasizing about how that would be cool to make that bomb and then pick the building he wants to blow up and how he can become famous and all of that. And then after he searches all this stuff, he makes his bomb and he goes and blows a building up. And he forgets that he did all the web searches. So you can go back and say, it's kind of interesting that before you became a suspect in this crime, there's this huge history of you studying bomb building and blowing up things. So similarly with something like this, if you went in his history prior to the murders and found a whole bunch of things on kidnapping, rape, bondage, whatever was in his searches, that would be very, very strong indirect evidence that you could say, he was into all this stuff, and then he's at the place where the girls get killed. So it makes him a very good suspect. But this is 2022. Theoretically, it's already done 65 plus best kidnapping and hostage movies ever made. Well, this is not really a hostage movie either, by the way. A hostage movie is where somebody does get kidnapped and they're being held by another government, or they're being held by the person who's asking for ransom, something like that. And it's all about how the police or whoever is involved has to find a loved one before they're killed, or they're paying the ransom, whatever it is. That is not the same thing as kidnapping and kidnapping young girls and killing them. So I don't think that's all that interesting. A man held hostage by a teen is kind of weird. So that's kind of a reversal. So yeah. So those, I'm not all that interested in that. So whether anything is made of it in court that the jury will go with and say, oh my God, he looked up kidnapping stuff, even if it was after the actual kidnapping. I don't know that that's very related. And, I've looked up a whole bunch of people look up different kinds of movies they might like to watch. And so they might look into serial killer movie without being serial killers. So I don't know that that's highly meaningful. So let's put that aside and go back to his psychology. All right. So one of the things the defense brings up is that he had signs of having when he came in to the prison, supposedly, he was a fragile man with a history of major depressive disorder and anxiety. And I keep hearing this. And hey, if you have seen in the courtroom, because as I point out, you haven't seen in the courtroom, but if you've been on one of the channels like Lawyer Lee, who I recommended, not some of the others I don't recommend, but if you've watched her videos, which go on for hours, and she has talked about this because she's taking notes because there's no videoing, and you have information, please put that below because I have not found it. So the thing I have not found is when the defense claims he has a history of major depressive disorder and anxiety, I want to know what the proof is. I mean, just because he says he has it doesn't mean it's true. Even his wife says he's depressed sometimes. That doesn't mean anything. What did they mean by that? Did he go get therapy? Did he have behaviors over the years that were really obvious? Did it interfere with his work? Did it interfere with his marriage? Did it interfere with his friends? What's the proof? And I have not seen it. So just because it's said doesn't mean a lot to me. But of course, I think the defense wants you to believe, and they want the jury to believe, that he was a fragile man. That one of two things. One is that he was so fragile and so anxious and had this depression that when the police came and started questioning, he's like, "Oh, screw it. It's over. I can't deal with it." And then when he went to prison, it just destroyed him. And that's why he started making all these false confessions, according to the defense. So they really want to push this. And Walla, who I'm not fond of, who is the one who spent so much time with him in prison, she said he also showed signs of dependent personality syndrome. Oh, Lord God. All right, let me explain that to you. First thing it's always important is when you hear any word that's syndrome, that means there's zero proof of it. It means that there's a cluster or a group of behaviors or symptoms that they have labeled a particular psychological disorder or a particular physical disorder. Now, I'm not saying it's always not true, because some people have what is labeled a disorder or labeled as syndrome, and it could be very, very real to that person and really affect their life. But on the other hand, I will read from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, the DSM-5. I absolutely despise the DSM in all its forms. Why do I despise them? Because they make up so many disorders. They make up so many versions of psychological issues. Basically, they take a bunch of behaviors. I think they stir them in a pot and then pour some out and then label that one, and pour some others out and label that one. They have so many. It's not like it's like, okay, there's 20 different things. No, there's hundreds of them. You can't, all these hundreds are just nonsense. Somebody's picking out different things to stick on a board and go, okay, let's call these 5 this. I do not find it credible. And over the years, the DSM, whoever puts that book out, they will remove a whole bunch of stuff and they'll toss in a whole bunch of different stuff. It keeps changing. Why does it keep changing? Well, they're saying, well, they're updating. Well, basically they're saying is, we have no proof of the last things, and we probably have no proof of these either, but here they are. So what is this thing they're calling a dependent personality disorder? It's characterized by a persistent need to be taken care of, which leads to submissive and clinging behaviors. And it includes difficulty making decisions, needs others to be responsible, fear of disagreement, difficulty starting projects, helpless when alone, unpleasant tasks, urgently forms new relationships, unrealistic worry. DPD, as it is known as, usually begins to develop in early childhood. Children and adolescents should only be diagnosed after a careful evaluation. Yes. As dependent behaviors may be developmentally appropriate at that age. You think? They're children. They're supposed to be dependent. The exact cause of DPD is unknown. but it likely involves a combination of biological, developmental, temperamental, and psychological factors. This is true for every single label you want to put on somebody. That's called human nature. You have the environment, you have your own personality, everything mixes together, and you may end up being narcissistic or psychopathic, or you may end up being super healthy. Who knows? And they don't know. Uh, some researchers believe that an authoritarian or overprotective parenting style can contribute to GPD. All right, so I want to know Walla, who I think should be fired, which is she's more help to the defense than the prosecution, I can tell you that. Anyway, the prosecution, Walla, said this is what he has. Really? Okay. He showed signs of it. So somebody says somebody shows signs. Anybody can say somebody shows signs. Okay. So you could have different psychologists come in, different psychiatrists. You could have 12 people off a bus stop, like the jury, come in and decide, oh, he's got signs of this. He's got signs of that. How meaningful is this? And I absolutely don't have any. It's just not meaningful because I don't even know if it's true. And she probably doesn't know if it's true because she only saw some signs. So anyway, this is something that's just being made up because the guy isn't happy. Well, that's for sure. I wouldn't be happy if I were him. If I were innocent and I'm just wandering around in that park and the police, I self-report I was there, and the police come back years later and accuse me of being a killer of 2 girls, and they're messing my life up. I'd be pretty depressed at that point. That's not a depressive personality. That's called reality. There's reasons to be depressed, which have nothing to do with the chemicals of your brain. If your marriage falls apart, you get depressed. I remember this because after I was married 25 years and we got divorced, I remember going through a depressive time. And somebody told me, maybe you should get some medication for that because, you might have this imbalance. I'm like, I should be depressed. If I'm not depressed, then I should have a problem. But if you've been married 25 years and suddenly your whole life is turned upside down, you should be depressed. That's normal. You lose a child. You're depressed. Why? Because you should be depressed. If you let's say suddenly your job is on the line, you're concerned that you're going to lose your job. You're going to have trouble finding another job. You won't be able to make your house payments. You become anxious. Is that an anxiety disorder? No, that's called reality. So the fact that he might be depressed or anxious while he's in prison, I'm going to say that's normal. Now, whether before prison any of that was true, I do not know because, again, they keep saying that. But so what proof do we have? Now he's in prison. Everybody thinks he's a killer, according to him. That's what he's thinking. That's what I look like. Well, he's right. His life is screwed. His life is screwed, regardless if he's guilty or innocent. It is screwed. I mean, you get to this point, you're married, you're working, your child grows up, you have a nice wedding, and you get arrested for a double homicide of 2 children. I'm going to say you're screwed. Now, the only way he will not be screwed is if he truly is a psychopath. He truly did kill the girls, and this whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket eventually. He doesn't get convicted, or he gets convicted and later gets an appeal and he gets out and he sues the state for millions. Then he's going to be a happy little camper. But if he's innocent, his life is screwed. I don't care what happens from here on out. His life will be screwed. Even if he gets off and they find him not guilty, a whole bunch of people are going to think he's guilty. Unless somebody else is arrested and proven the killer. But unless that happens, which is very unlikely, he will go through the rest of his life with that hanging over his head, maybe lose his family because they might think he's guilty too. So if he's not guilty, he's screwed. And even if he were truly innocent, the Innocence Project rolls along, gets him out, and he sues for millions, maybe then he might become a hero. Maybe at that point in life, even if he's innocent, he will say, well, it was horrible so many years, but I come out now. I'm a hero. Netflix is doing a a show on me, and I'm rich as crap. So maybe he could come out of it later on feeling pretty good. These are all things that are possible. But for right now, he goes to prison, and he doesn't start falling apart until April. And this is where they say he goes downhill. So he doesn't exhibit those kind of behaviors right away, supposedly. Although maybe some depression, maybe some anxiety. Do we know? No, we don't. So again, it would be normal. So he doesn't have psychosis until somewhere around April, where he starts confessing to everybody, his mother, his wife, the guards, whoever is available, the wallet lady, whoever. And he starts doing very bizarre things, eating his feces, running around naked, saying strange things. And the question is he faking it so he looks insane? Or so he can, the attorneys have told him, hey, look, you've been in here for a while, and under not so great conditions, why don't you start looking nuts? And that will help you in the long run. Because if you handle it, you're going to look like a psychopath who can manage these things. But if you can't handle it and go into these psychotic moments, people will think you're an innocent guy who's falling apart. And are we going to be able to prove which one it is? That he's truly falling apart or that he's faking it? All we know is that the prosecution puts on their people, defense puts on their people. Prosecution hasn't done a very good job showing that he's a psychopath who's playing everybody. I don't think I don't think they did a good job on that. I think the defense is going to have a field day with more and more of that because they can. And at this point, they can say, look at all these strange behaviors, and a lot of people are going to go, well, the guy's losing it. Now, as I said yesterday, some of the things he said to his mother and his wife, yes, I killed the girls. Why aren't you believing me? I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Those things are interesting because those are said in a very calm way. And that's not the normal thing that an innocent guy would be willing to confess to. To say, I'm innocent and I want my daughter to believe, I'm going to lie and have my daughter believe I killed girls. I'm going to have my wife believe I killed little girls. I'm going to have my mother believe I killed little girls. That's a very weird thing for a person who's totally innocent to say. Now, somebody who is, somebody comes in and says, I killed somebody, and there's some whack job who wants attention. That makes sense. But for a guy who's been actually arrested, charged, in prison, going to trial, to say all of these things and have his own family believe he is this kind of horrible person, that to me is the most strong evidence I have that he is actually guilty. So, but the psychosis attempt this is where the defense is going to go. He's lost his mind. He'll say anything. He's been pushed into it. Now he's even believing that he did it. They're going to do whatever they can to make it look like he, just said stuff because he lost his mind. How effective that will be on the jury, I don't know. I've always said I think it's going to come down to the confession issue as to what the jury will believe or not believe, what they'll decide, whether he did it or he didn't do it. And yes, there's other pieces of indirect evidence, circumstantial evidence that that he was there, that he was wearing clothes like the clothes, and the bullet, and now the van issue. And I'm a little confused over the van issue. Now, the defense is trying to tear that apart right now, trying to say the guy that was driving the van, maybe he actually stopped someplace and didn't go straight home. So he wouldn't have been there at the time the girls were down the hill happened. So he doesn't think that they're saying that, so if he said he got spooked and saw a van, it really wasn't that van. So I don't understand the van issue totally yet. I don't understand whether there's any way he could have found out. I don't know when he exactly said he was spooked by the van, when that was stated. Did he know about it earlier? Or did he know nothing about a van in the area and said that, and yet there was a van in the area? If he never had any way of knowing a van was in the area, That's a good piece of information. If he actually knows it's a white van and there was a white van there, that is a good piece of information. That's a good piece of indirect evidence that you can make some assumptions and say, well, inferences and say, hey, how would he know? Why would he even think of that if it didn't happen? Is that why he stopped and didn't rape the girls? But some of this is a little murky, and I'm waiting to see. I'd like to see something more solid, and so I can see exactly the time frame of everything. So I haven't seen that yet. So therefore, the jury, I don't know what the jury is getting, or whether they're just not knowing exactly either. This is why it gets so confusing. I'm not in the courtroom, but I'm a little confused over, when he said what he said, how he said what he said, how it was recorded, and then the whole van issue. I just don't know. And did that really stop him? It makes no sense to me also that he saw the van or something. So then he decides, instead of just running off, he'll cut their throats and then try to cover up their bodies and spend another 30 minutes to an hour there doing all that crap when he didn't need to do any of that crap. So I find it a little questionable that van spooked him off. So I don't know. That to me is just a big fat blur. And maybe I'll learn more about that in the next few days. And again, if you have information, if you watch like Lori Lee's channel and you know where she said everything about the van, do put a timestamp. Send me put the in a comment, put the timestamp. Don't say, well, she talked about that in the 3-hour video she did. Tell me where it was. If you find that for me and I can see that this is exactly what the defense said, this is exactly what the prosecution said, this is the evidence they have, send that along and I maybe can comment on that. But right now, yeah, the psychology thing is very murky as far as whether he really has any kind of disorder or not. And just because one person says, oh, he had some signs of, is not very convincing. And to me, it's a bunch of malarkey, but that's me. So that's where the jury is going to be too, because they're going to hear from these different people. And it's that, the problem with a lot of psychology is it's not very solid. It's not like medical stuff. Like the person has an enlarged heart. And you can see he's got an enlarged heart. To say he has some signs of he is dependent. And how that helps us out, I don't know. So this gets to be just a lot of gray areas of stuff and people's opinions that aren't very necessarily very valid. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to stop there. Let's see, it's the weekend. Are they coming back Saturday again? I don't know if they are. But if they do, I might comment. Otherwise, I might see you all on Monday if something comes out. But again, in the comments, please feel free to put timestamps on. Do not send me to channels I do not like, which I've already mentioned. Let me just say this right here in case you're going to send me something, because I really don't want to deal with stuff I don't want the channels advertised, and I don't want garbage from their channels. That would include, I'm not fond of Andrea Burkhart. I'm not saying she's a grifter. She's just massively defense oriented, and I'm not fond of her channel. But I'm not saying she's a terrible person or anything. Just I'm not fond of the way she deals with things. But the one that I do not want to hear from, which people keep sending me, which I talked about last time, is what's the name of it? Where'd it go? True Crime Design. That person is a grifter and has massive conspiracy theories and is insulting to the families of these girls. And that person needs to shut the heck up. But she's not going to, because she's making a lot of money. So, but don't send me anything from her channel and don't advertise her, because I will. Just remove those comments. If you like the channel, that's a free world. You're free to go over there. But if you go over there, don't bring it back to me. And don't encourage other people to go over there. So anyway, thank you for being here, and I might see you sometime soonish. Bye.